it's Hannah here from Hand Done Crochet, and I'm really excited to be with you today. Today we're going to be making the Wanderer's blanket, which I've designed for the Furls Crochet blog hop this year of 2021. The pattern is available for free on my blog, but there's also an option to buy the PDF pattern where I've laid everything out nicely for you and done a little section as well on tips and tricks for mosaic crochet technique. So mosaic crochet is really fun to do. It looks really tricky, but as long as you can read a chart, which I'll teach you to do in a minute, you'll be absolutely fine. To make the Wanderer's blanket, I used, funnily enough, Wander acrylic yarn from Furls, which is a new yarn. It's 100% acrylic, and you get 120 yards or 109 meters of worsted weight yarn in 100 grams. So it's a weight category 4 yarn. And I have put all the details in the description of how much yarn you will need and what colours I used, but it's also in the blog post and the PDF if you'd like to get the pattern. You'll also need a 6.5mm crochet hook. This is a size K, and this is a Peppermint Swirl from Furls. Then you'll also need a pair of scissors and a needle for your ends. So the first thing you need to decide is how you'd like to read the pattern. I think the easiest way to create the pattern and make your blanket is to read the chart rather than the word pattern. But within the blog post and within the PDF pattern, I've also provided a worded version because I know that some people find that easier to work through as well. And if it's your first time of working mosaic crochet, it might be worth using both of them hand in hand and seeing which one you prefer. So just go over there now and have a little look and work out which way you think is going to work better for you. And I'll meet you back here when you've got everything you need. So to start with, I'd suggest that we make a little swatch with some scraps of yarn before you start the pattern in full, because then you'll know kind of whether you've got your tension right, and also you'll get the hang of it rather than doing one big long row to begin with and then working out that you're really unsure as to what goes where and how to do it. So with that in mind, I'm going to do for this video this little sample square here, which obviously is not the full blanket, but it is part of it. It's a big chunk of it. Each square on the chart represents a stitch or a skip stitch. The colour that you're working with are the stitches for that row, and any other colour that you see in the row are the skip stitches, and you need to work a chain one and skip the stitch. That all probably makes no sense whatsoever, but as we go along, I promise it will. So basically, we are going to be looking at this row here. We're going to work 1, 2, 3, 4 in this lighter grey, but then we come across this darker grey. So we're not going to work any stitch there at all. We're going to work a chain one for the technique that I'm using here. Very often you'll be told to add an extra chain, but I don't think we need to in this example. And then you're going to skip that stitch and you're going to work into the next one. So mosaic crochet begins like any other pattern with a foundation chain, and then our first row, reading the chart from right to left each time, is going to be a single crochet, a US single crochet into each stitch. And we know that because you've got a single block of colour the whole way along that first row. You see that light grey. So we have 35 stitches in total in this chart. So we're going to begin by chaining 36. So to begin, we're going to put a slip knot onto the hook and we're going to chain 36. And for this first row, reading from right to left of the chart, you can see that it's all this pale grey colour. So we are going to work a single crochet into each stitch along. So working from the second chain from the hook and each along, I like to go in my back bumps here. You're going to work a single crochet into each chain from the second chain along, and that will then give you 35 stitches, which is how many you've got in your chart. Once you've completed that first row, we now need to turn our work, which we're going to do it each time, and this will now be the wrong side of your work. And you need to chain one, and you're going to work a single crochet into each stitch along, but this isn't going to be row 2 in the pattern or in the chart. This is going to be row 1A. So for each row in the chart, you're going to have 2 rows of actual crochet. You're going to have row 1 and then row 1A, row 2, row 2A, row 3, row 3A. This row, row 1A, is going to be simply a single crochet into each stitch along. These first 2 rows are almost like a foundation to sort of set up where your mosaic pattern is going to fit on your blanket. At the end of row 1A, you're now going to turn your work, and we're going to be at the right side of our work now, and we're going to be ready to start row 2. So if we look at our chart, and I'll zoom in a little here, row 2, we see we've got light grey and we've also got dark grey, but we're only going to be using light grey for this row. What we need to do, each of these dark grey sections, we need to leave a space for that stitch to drop down into, because we are going to change to that dark grey colour, and the dark grey colour is going to be worked along the next set of rows, and it's going to drop down into the row that we're currently working. So we need to create a space here. Now in traditional mosaic crochet patterns, you generally work an extra chain for the space, but I have found with this size of hook and this size of yarn, actually a nice loose chain 1 works really well. So we are going to count up how many we have working from the right to the left of your chart. On your second row here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 in the light grey before we get to a dark grey. So we're going to chain 1 to start our row, and then we're going to work those 4 single crochets. 1, 2, 3, and then 4. And so now we come to a dark grey in the chart. We're going to chain 1, a nice loose chain 1, and we're going to skip a stitch, because that's our space then for that dark grey to come in when we're ready for it. And then we see the next stitch is a light grey, so we can work that into the next one. And then we have another dark grey, so we're going to chain 1 and we're going to leave a space for it, and then we come to a light grey, so we work a stitch. We have another dark grey, so we have a chain 1 and leave a space for it, and then a light grey, so we're going to work into that next stitch, and then another dark grey for a chain 1, leave a space for it, and then a stitch into the next one. And then we have another dark grey, so chain 1, leave a space and stitch into the next, and then another dark grey, so we chain 1 and leave a space for it. Now I do sometimes get lost, but that's fine because I would have printed one out and I'd normally do check off as I go, which is a really good way of doing it. However, our printer is broken, so I don't have one, I'm afraid, at the moment. So you'll have to bear with me. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces now for dark grey. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces. Perfect. So now we come to 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 in the light grey. So we've missed this one, ready for our dark grey to go into, and we're going to work in the next 5 in the light grey. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. And so now working along to the next sort of section here with the dark greys, we can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 of the dark greys. So we can just work away by going chain 1, leave a space, so that's 1, and work in the next. Chain 1, leave a space, and work in the next is 2. Chain 1, leave a space, work in the next is 3. Chain 1, leave a space, work in the next is 4. Chain 1, leave a space, work in the next is 5. And chain 1, leave a space is 6. So now we've come to the end and we have 1, 2, 3, 4 of the light grey left to do. So we've left this space for a stitch, and hopefully, if we've counted right, we have 4 left to work into. 1, 2, 3 and 4. Hooray! It's always a relief, isn't it, when you get to the end and you've counted right. So that is now row 2, and you can't really see them yet, but there are spaces there for your darker stitches to go into. But we're not yet ready to change to that darker colour because we need to work row 2A. So we're going to turn over, and from now on, throughout the whole pattern actually, your A rows are going to mimic, they're going to be a repeat. So everywhere that you have a chain 1 and a space in this row, in row A of that, you're also going to have that. So what we mean is you really don't need the chart to work along with this. You can just follow your actual stitches that you've done. But if you want to do like a double check of yourself, then it's possibly a good idea to go back through the chart again. But I'm going to copy here. So I've got 4 actual stitches. And then I come to a chain 1. So I'm going to do a chain 1 and miss that one, and then work into the next stitch I come to. I've got a chain 1 that I copy and a stitch that I work into. A chain 1 that I copy and a stitch into the next one. And as you see, it's actually quite easy just to follow that. Your A rows are really quick in comparison to your actual rows. So just work all the way along, copying what you've done in the first pass of that row. Just remembering to make your chains fairly loose. Now as we come to the end of the row, we are ready to change colour. So I'm going to do that on the last yarn over of this stitch, this last stitch of the row. Now in the chart, obviously it's dark grey, but I have a different colour to work with today. So I'm going to take my other colour, I'm going to yarn over, and I'm going to complete that stitch with the new one, and that's your new colour joined ready. And now we're ready to work row 3 in our chart, and this is where the magic of mosaic starts to happen. So for any of our rows, we're going to chain 1 to begin with, and what you'll notice is that for every time you change colour, the first stitch of each row is that colour. So if you're ever worried, can't work out where you are, just look at the end of your row and figure out from there. So we've chained one, and we see now we have these darker, our second colour, we have 3 stitches in that second colour. So we're going to go ahead and work a single crochet into 3. Now we have a different colour, the other colour, the main colour that we are using, this light grey, in the next stitch. So in order to drop that down on the next set of rows that we do, we need to do the same as we did before and chain 1 and leave a space for it. So you're going to chain 1 and leave a space. Now we get to the most exciting part of Mosaic Crochet. You get to drop down a stitch. So we have here these 2 of this second colour stacked on top of each other. So if you look here, we have this stitch that we're skipping for this light grey here, and then we have these spaces, these chain 1 spaces, and this stitch that we left ready to work this one into. Yarn over and pop your hook into that stitch down where you left the space for it, and then yarn over, so you've got all of that. The last 2 rows are out of the way for you. These chain 1s, you're not going to use those at all, and you're going to work as normal a double crochet there, and that has dropped down your stitch, and at the back you've got your chains sitting behind it. So our next stitch, as you see, is a stitch into the main pattern. So it's just a single crochet into the next, and the next one again is a drop down into the rows below. So that works out because we've got chains here for the 2 rows before that we did, and we're going to work into this stitch here that we have ready for it, and you're going to work a double crochet there, and we just carry on like this. So we now have another stitch here, and then it drops down again, so a double crochet into that, a stitch in the next, and we drop down again. And the more you do this, the more you kind of get a feel for where your stitches are actually going anyway. So now we have come to the end of that section, as it were, of drop down stitches and worked stitches. And now in this dark grey row here that we have in row 3, we can see that we need to now chain 1 and skip 1 because we have a light grey colour here. So chain 1, skip 1, and then we have a stitch in the next of our darker colour. We have a chain 1 and a skip 1 for this lighter grey here, and then a stitch in the next. A chain 1 and a skip 1 for this lighter, and then, as luck would have it, we have come to our next space that we created ready for this drop down stitch here. So if we scoot along, we can see that that is now just a repeat of what we did here. And this is the good thing about most mosaic patterns are firstly symmetrical, and they're kind of obvious as to where things sit. So we're going to work a double crochet into the space we made before, a stitch into the main, a double crochet, and a stitch into the main, and just repeat that along. For this little section. So now we've come to the end of that little area, and we can see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches left, and you'll also note that we end the row with this the colour that you're working with as well. So we now need to chain 1 and skip 1 for that lighter grey colour there, and then we have 3 of the darker colour to work in the last 3. So skip this one and then work in the last 3. And that's your row 3 completed. So to work row 3A, it's slightly different because we need to copy what we've done, but you just need to be wary because you see you've got your three stitches there are really obvious, and then you can chain 1, you know you've got to chain 1 and skip 1, but then you have to be careful that you don't miss the drop down stitches that you've worked, because they kind of hide a little bit. So just chain 1 to begin with, and then we work a single crochet into each stitch that you have, and every chain 1 that you have, you work a chain 1 over the top of it. So now we've come here to a drop down stitch, so you just need to make sure that you don't miss that. It's really easy to miss them, and I have definitely done that before. And so for the last stitch, we've now completed row 3A, and we know that we're going to need to change back to our lighter grey colour for the next row. If we scoot along, we can see row 4 is a lighter grey colour. So we're going to yarn over, and because we're working a border around this blanket, I do carry the lighter colour up. So yarn over and pull through to complete your stitch, and you're there ready to start your next row. So these little nooks here, they will be covered with your border, so you don't need to worry about those. Hopefully this is all starting to make sense. If it makes complete sense, then you're probably ready just to hop over to the blog, grab the chart and the pattern, and just get going with your blanket. But if not, I'm going to work a few more rows just to show you, just to reinforce what I've said, and then I will, once I finish this swatch, I will show you how to work the border and also how to make the big tassels. So for row 4, we're back with our lighter yarn, and we're going to chain 1 as we always do to begin the row, and then we see we have 2 in the lighter, so 2 stitches there, and then we have a darker one dropping down, so we chain 1 and we skip 1. So this is where you have to kind of be on the ball a bit, and lots of people say they can't manage to do this and watch TV at the same time, or have a glass of wine at the same time. I've been known to make very wonky mosaic when I've had some wine. So I've done 2, and I've chained 1 and skipped 1 for this darker colour, and now we come to this one, and this is a lighter one but that drops down into our row below. So yes, we have a space there ready for it, so we're going to work a double crochet here into that space, and then we have 2 in the lighter yarn, and then we're going to do 1, 2, 3 and 4 with a lighter in between, so 4 darker, so we need to make spaces for those. So we're going to do 1 space and then a stitch, 2 space and a stitch, 3 space and a stitch, and finish with that 4 to complete that section. And now we see we have 2 before we get to anything exciting. And now we have a drop down stitch, which we have a space for here. And now we have 1 on top of that one there. A drop down stitch next. One here. And then a drop down stitch. And now scooting along, we can see we have 2 straightforward stitches. And then we repeat that little motif that we've just done of 1, 2, 3 and 4 in the darker. So we're going to chain 1, skip 1 for that darker stitch, and then work 1. Chain 1, skip 1, and that's 2. Chain 1, skip 1 is 3. Chain 1, skip 1 is 4. And so we now have 2 regular stitches. And now we've come across this drop down in the lighter, which we have a space for here. So a double crochet into that space there. And then the last 3 stitches we have a darker one, so we're going to chain 1 and leave a space for it, and then a regular stitch into the last 2. So you see, the further along you get, you'll have to be looking at kind of two rows at a time, because you need to work out where you need to leave a space for the next rows, and also where you need to drop down where you have a space. So now we're ready to work for A, and we're going to chain 1, and just being careful, as I said before, to make sure you get absolutely all of the stitches that you need, using your chart for your numbers if you need to. You're going to work a single crochet into each stitch that there is, and then a chain 1 over the top of every chain 1 that you have. So if you go ahead and work this, and I'll meet you back here for the next row. At the end of that row, I've changed over to my new colour, my darker colour that I'm going to be using, that starts with 1 stitch in the first stitch here. So I'm going to chain 1 as we always do, and a stitch into that first one. And then we have a lighter, so we're going to chain 1 and we're going to skip the next stitch. And then we have a drop down stitch in the next one, which we do have a space for. And then a stitch in 2. We have a lighter colour now, so we're going to chain 1 and skip 1. And then as you see, as you work along the pattern more, you'll be able to, rather than go, oh, a drop down 1, drop down 1, you'll be able to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7, knowing that wherever you have a space, you'll work a drop down. So you now know that all of the next 7 stitches are going to be in this darker colour, whether they're drop down or whether they're a normal stitch. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7. And now we have a lighter colour, so we have a chain 1 and a miss 1, and then a single darker colour. And so moving along, We now have a lighter, so we're going to chain 1 and skip 1, and then you see we have 3 in the darker colour. A lighter colour is next, so a chain 1 and skip 1, and then a darker colour. A lighter colour, so chain 1 and skip 1, and then we're back to this motif again, so we know we've got 7 there. So we have a space, so we drop down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And a lighter colour, so chain 1 and skip 1, and then we have 3 in the darker, so 1, 2, and the third one we have a space for, so it's a drop down. So as long as you know your previous row is correct, you can just follow along and work the actual numbers rather than going, oh, stitch, stitch, drop down, stitch, stitch, drop down. So now we have a lighter colour, so a chain 1, skip 1, and a stitch in the very last one. And we're going to stay in this colour so that when we turn, we're going to work our row A. So that will be our row 5A. And that's all there is to reading a mosaic crochet chart. So if you want to go ahead, grab the pattern and work the main section of your blanket. It's got 100 and something stitches in the main, so it does take a while, but it's in worsted weight yarn and it does work out really nicely. And once you have the hang of it, you really kind of get into the zone of it. It's a lovely thing to do. And once you've completed that, I will come find me here again and I'll show you how to work the border and pop the tassels on the blanket. Now that you've worked your entire blanket, as you see I have a little swatch here to show you, we're ready to work the border around it, and it's really simple. I went for something really straightforward because I think that the blanket itself does all the talking. It doesn't really need anything fancy to go around it. So using a contrast yarn, by the way, I have loved doing this in 2 colours, and I think I'm probably going to make another blanket in just 2 colours because I really like it, or even perhaps a bag because I really like that idea. Anyway, I digress. For the border, we are going to join our yarn to the right side facing. You'll see that the wrong side is just nice and stripy. The right side has got the pattern on it. With the right side facing, you're going to join it to the first stitch of the last row. And then we're going to chain 1. And now you're going to make this your corner. So you're going to work a half double crochet, a chain 1, and a half double crochet in that first stitch. And that will push itself around the corner as we follow along. And then you're going to work a half double crochet into every stitch up until the last one. And in the last stitch of the row, we're going to work a half double crochet, a chain 1, and then a half double crochet. Now we need to rotate to work along the side of the blanket, and you're not going to work a half double crochet into every single row here. So to work along the side here, we need to do 3 half double crochet in every 4 rows. So just work in the sides of 3 and then miss 1. is probably the easiest way to work this. So 1, 2 and 3, and then we're going to miss this one, and that will just help it sit much nicer, because even when you block it, if you do a stitch in every row, it still seems quite wibbly. So miss that one, and then 1, 2, 3, miss that row, 1, 2, 3. If you wanted to block your blanket first so that it will really stretch out, and then you can fit a stitch in the side of each row, then you can do. But I tried that and I think it loses the effect a little bit. So I prefer to leave it as it is and block it once you've put the border on, which I know is a controversial thing. And now we're at this corner stitch. We're going to half double crochet, chain 1 and half double crochet in that first one there, and then you're going to rotate, and then you're going to work a half double crochet into each stitch along here, and then in this last one you're going to do your half double crochet, chain 1, half double crochet to make a corner, and then you'll rotate and you'll work along the other side here. So the important thing is that however many stitches you choose to do on your sides, you just need to make them even, make the same amount of stitches on both sides of your blanket. So if you go ahead and do that, and then I'll meet you back here to join our corner and work the second round. At the end of the first round of the border, we just simply need to slip stitch into the first stitch to join it, and then we are going to chain 1, and then for this round we're going to work a half double crochet into every stitch around, but then we're going to add 3 half double crochet into every chain 1 corner space. So we begin with a half double crochet in that first one, and then we're going to work 3 half double crochet into this corner, and then you just carry on working a half double crochet into each stitch along till you get to the next chain 1 corner space, and then work 3 double crochet into that one. And once you've got all the way around, you're going to slip stitch into your first stitch to join, and then that's your border complete. But of course, if you're anything like me and you change things up and switch things around, you'll change your border, you'll add a few more rounds, you'll do whatever you want to it, and that's great. I love it when people change my patterns, I really do. So if you go ahead and finish the border, and then I'll meet you back here and I'll show you how I make my tassels. To finish the blanket off, we need to make 4 of these lovely chunky tassels, 1 for each of the corners, so I'll show you how to do that now. I've tried lots of different ways of making tassels, and I've come to the conclusion I've used CD cases, if anyone has any of those anymore, DVD cases, if anyone has any of those anymore. But I've come to the conclusion that the best thing to use for them is a children's hardback book, because they have this nice ridge at the end that you can get your scissors into. Honestly, it was like a eureka moment when I found this out. So all we need to do is grab our yarn, and holding it down with your thumb at one end to make sure the first stretch is the right length, just wrap it around as many times as you like. I think I did these tassels probably like 25-30 times or something like that. Just make sure you do it the same amount of times for any matching sets of tassels that you do. Obviously the more times you wind it round, the chunkier it will be. Something along those lines. And then you can break your yarn. So now we need a strip of yarn that's going to act as the thing that then ties onto our blanket in this case. And you're going to slide your yarn off. If you can manage to get it through without sliding it off, then do so. But otherwise, just slop that yarn through now. And then you're going to tie it tightly. With a double knot at the top. And we have, thank you book, the start of our tassel. So then we just need to cut another length of yarn that's going to work for the middle section. And just make sure that you make this long enough that they're going to meet at the bottom here. And then you tie towards the top, or however puffy you want this section at the top to be. Tie it tightly there. And now we're ready to snip the bottom and create the tassel. So snip through all of them. And then as you see, you'll probably have lots of straggly ends, so we can just trim them all to length. And you'll end up with lovely, nice, neat, chunky tassels. So when you've made your tassels and got fluff absolutely everywhere, you're ready to attach them to the blanket. So you have options here. It's just kind of wherever you would like to attach them, really. I've chosen in this case to pop them into this corner space here, just to add a bit of detail, and then it sort of looks nice and neat, as opposed to trying to fiddle them into the lighter pink stitches. And then I would tie and secure there at the back. Once you've tied it secure, I would then thread it through a few of the stitches here at the back, and then thread it through into the back of the tassel again. And you're all done. I really hope that you've enjoyed this video and that it's been helpful. If you make a blanket, I would absolutely love to see it. So I'll put my social media links and email links and all sorts at the bottom in the description. I'll also put the link for the yarn, the hook, everything that I've used today, plus where you can find the free pattern on my blog. And come find me, come let me know what you're making. I'd love to know. I'd love for you to subscribe and tap the bell button, and then you'll get notified when I launch new videos and tutorials. See you again soon. Bye.